let's go ahead and go to some of the news of the day, because just because the holidays are upon us does not mean there is not news. So the Southern Poverty Law Center is at the center of the border debate now. And it's really important because, like I said, the Southern Poverty Law Center, that's just down the road. And our top story yesterday was actually about them too. So the Southern Poverty Law Center causing all kinds of havoc and mayhem, despite the fact that the holidays are coming up, and goodness knows I have my differences with them. I've invited them to come on my show, I don't know how many times, and every single time, I just don't get a response. I've invited them. I've got in touch specifically with their media department. They just won't take me up on my offer. So I guess they don't want to come on and actually address some of these things. But nonetheless, so the Southern Poverty Law Center is really at the heart of the border debate right now. And their latest thing is that they actually wound up winning their case. There was a district judge in San Francisco. Again, I don't know why the Southern Poverty Law Center is involving themselves in something going on in San Francisco, but nonetheless, this was their idea. So there was a ruling by a district court in San Francisco by Judge John Teager. I actually, I thought about maybe getting a different judge, but you can't get another Teager because the wonderful thing about Teagers is he's the only one. So it's spelled with one G, but it's spelled the same as Tigger. Anyway, so John Teager of the U.S. District Court there has made this ruling, and he has essentially said that the executive order by the president that you could not, basically directing all the people that are coming through in the caravan, warning them, look, if you want to seek asylum, you got to do it at a border crossing. You can't just rush across the border and then claim asylum. You've got to actually go to one of the stations there that is controlled by our border patrol, that is controlled by ICE, and have explained to them that you're trying to seek asylum, and then we'll hear your case and figure out exactly what it is that you need to do. Well, this judge has said that, I tell you what, before we even get to the actual ruling, there's something that I wanted to point out. This man is a district judge. And I'm not trying to belittle him. Being a district judge is a huge honor, but he is making a ruling for something pretty far out of his jurisdiction. The idea that any district judge anywhere in the country can make a ruling that will affect the entire country and tell the entire federal government you can't do this in any state is pretty far reaching. I mean, if a judge here in Alabama started giving a ruling on what Texas had to do, I'd say it was an overreach too. Or Arizona or New York or whatever state you want to do. The idea that he, as a district judge that's supposed to be dealing with district matters, can say to the federal government, you're not allowed to do this, that is a pretty far overreach of the court. And it also defies about 180 years of court precedent, the ruling that he makes here. So let's actually get into the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about. He is saying now that based on overturning the Trump executive order, which honestly, I thought it was stupid for Trump to give that executive order, because what he was saying in his executive order is already the way that the law reads, so there was no point in making that executive order. And because he made that executive order, it kind of opened up the door for other people to go against it the way that they did in this court. So I think actually the president made a blunder, even though I agree with everything in the executive order. Putting an executive order forward kind of opened the door for legal challenges. And like I said, the law already said essentially what President Trump was saying in his executive order, so there was really no reason for him to direct ICE on this, or at least not in my opinion. Maybe there's a legal scholar that has a different take on that, but nonetheless, this ruling is completely off the wall, because he's saying now that you can seek asylum. The federal government cannot deny a person seeking asylum regardless of how they entered the country. And this is one of the issues that I have with these liberal activist judges that will just rule based on their own feelings. They don't think about the consequences of their ruling, and they don't rule based on what the law actually says. And this is the problem that you're running into. Because if we are to follow this judge's opinion of how a person seeks asylum, then let's say you've been living in America for 30 years illegally. Been living here for 3 decades. And all of a sudden ICE shows up and they're about to deport you. Say, whoa, I'm seeking political asylum. from Honduras. Let's just say that's where he's from. Well, you can't seek asylum after you've already broken the law. That's the thing. You cannot. Asylum status does not undo crimes that you've committed. And crossing the border, whether you like it or not, crossing the border into the United States without proper documentation is illegal. This is the thing. We constantly talk about it as though it's not a crime. It is a crime. It is absolutely a crime. It is illegal to cross the border. That's why they are called illegal immigrants or illegal aliens, whichever phrase you want to use. And so this is the problem that you're running into. The judge is treating it as though saying, well, I'm seeking asylum status, undoes the fact that you already broke the law. And the penalty for that law needs to be enacted. And here's another issue that you're going to run in if we follow this to its logical conclusion, the ruling that this judge gives. What is to stop any immigrant at any time from claiming asylum status, regardless of how long he's been here, regardless of how he entered the country? What is to stop that from happening? Or what's to stop an immigrant that has already been here for a while and actually did migrate even legally, but has overstayed his visa and now that's expired and he stayed in the country anyway, which, by the way, accounts for about half of the illegal aliens in the country. Can he just say, oh, I'm seeking asylum from, whatever country I flew in from? Let's say I'm seeking political asylum from Syria. Well, you've been here 25 years. You've got kids. It's a little late to start seeking asylum or notifying us that that's the reason you're coming here. And so this is the problem with this ruling. It basically throws out the idea that we even have a border. Because if anybody can come in any time and just throw their hands up and say asylum when they get caught by the authorities, regardless of how long it's been, regardless of how they got in, regardless of their motivation, if that is the case, then we might as well just not have a border. And I'm not trying to make a straw man argument out of this. I'm not trying to take it to a ridiculous extreme. But really, what's to stop any person from doing exactly that if we follow this ruling to its logical conclusion? And another thing, doesn't that kind of negate the idea that we should have legal ports of entry in the first place? Because if it doesn't matter whether or not you came through an illegal point of entry or a legal point of entry or not, then why do we have stations down there in the first place? If you can just plow on through and be treated exactly the same as someone who actually did the legal thing and tried to come through a point of entry, then what's the point of having them? This whole thing makes no sense. And I think the truth is that's the real goal. I think underlying all of this, and this is why I have such a problem with activist judges that judge based on how they think the law ought to read as opposed to how it actually does read, I think that's actually the eventual goal. What they're actually wanting to do is they're wanting it to get to the point to where there is no legal point of entry because anybody can cross the border at any time and it doesn't matter. That seems to be the direction that this is heading. Because otherwise, why would you want to reward those who crossed the border illegally and committed a crime exactly the same as those that actually did it the legal way? This is the issue that you're running into. And here's another issue that you're running into with this ruling. He stated in his opinion that the president cannot unilaterally undo a law passed by Congress. Yeah, neither can a judge. You can't unilaterally, especially as a lone district judge, overturn the federal law. And that's exactly what he's doing. And not just some random federal law, the Constitution. But let's read the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4. The United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. Okay, so there you have it, black and white, the Constitution. The federal government has a specifically stated duty to keep people that are not supposed to be here from getting into the states. It has that responsibility to the states. That was part of the design of the Constitution. They're saying, we're going to have authority over immigration and naturalization, And because we have that authority, we are by extension going to take on the responsibility to make sure that the states are not invaded by foreigners. They're not invaded by foreign forces. Well, what if anybody can just come through the border at any time that they want to, how is that not derelict in their duty, their constitutionally given duty to keep the states from being invaded? Explain that one to me. Because I don't see how you get there. I don't see how you can say that the federal government, let's just ignore Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution because I want these people to come in. And one of the things that he's saying is, well, the president can't unilaterally undo a law by Congress. What law passed by Congress says that asylum seekers are to be granted asylum regardless of where their point of entry was? Because I don't know about that law. Now, maybe it's out there. Maybe some legal scholar can point it out to me. But to my knowledge, Congress has never passed that law. And so the idea that he's citing an overreach of executive power is hilarious because he's engaging in an overreach of judicial power. And the basis of his case that President Trump overreached would necessitate that he'd have to provide a specific federal law that his executive order defies, and he can't do it. He doesn't cite it in his opinion because it does not exist. And this is the issue that you're running into. Because if you could provide the law, that would be one thing, but that's not happening. So the Southern Poverty Law Center and the ACLU, they're the ones that brought this case. But here's another issue that you have with the people that are bringing the case forward. How did you get standing? Because in law, to acquire standing, in other words, to be enabled to sue somebody, to bring a case against somebody, you have to prove damages. Well, how do you prove damages if you're the SPLC and the ACLU? They're not being kept out of the country. So how did they even get standing to get to the point to where their case could be heard? Here's how, because this is all a matter of public record. They claimed that they would have to expend resources to defend their position if this were taken. So in other words, because it would cost them money to represent either clients or to represent people on a legal level, they're saying that because it would cost them money, that was damages. First of all, nobody's holding a gun to their head and making them do that. And second of all, if that is the case, if that is enough to get standing, then I can sue every single liberal media outlet in the country because I have to do prep work and it costs me money and it costs me time to be able to put together my arguments and think about how I'm going to counter it. Seriously, that was their standing. They're saying that they're going to have to expend money and time putting together all this stuff, put together arguments against it. Well, if that's the case, then how is it that I can't sue Bill Maher and Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon and CNN and MSNBC and Think Progress and Huffington Post? Why can I not sue those guys? Because if that constitutes damages by me voluntarily going out and using my time and my resources to counter their arguments, then you would have people suing each other all the time. I am choosing to take that fight up. And the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center are choosing to take up this fight. And so not only is the ruling itself bad, they should have never been granted standing in the first place to even see a day in court.